There is a solution for that is sponsored by VARC Solutions. VARC Solutions helps small businesses succeed by delivering expert QuickBooks bookkeeping, consulting, quick-based development, and integrated solutions. If you own a small to medium-sized business that uses QuickBooks or QuickBase, the experts at VARC Solutions can help. In business since 1999, with people who care and the knowledge and experience to solve your toughest problems. Visit varcsolutions.com for all your QuickBooks needs. Welcome back to another edition of There's a Solution for That, where we help small businesses succeed by discussing challenging business problems and best-in-class solutions. All right, welcome everybody back to There's a Solution for That, the podcast where we talk about business problems and solutions to those problems. And we've got a great guest on the show today, Jim Marascio of Equals 11. And Jim, I'm going to let you kind of do your intro here in just a second, but want to just kind of real quickly introduce the topic. I know that, we do a little bit of software development. It sounds like you've been doing something in the software implementation space for quite a long time. So really looking forward to leveraging your knowledge and experience. But the reason why I wanted to have you on is because, there's a lot of companies out there that are doing software implementation. Sometimes they're doing it themselves. Sometimes they're looking for consultants to advise them. Sometimes they're looking to completely outsource this stuff. And there's a lot of problems with that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. So I want to just kind of dig into that and get some of the benefits of your knowledge and experience for our audience. So Jim, tell us just a little bit about what you do at Equals 11.
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Jim Marascio. I'm founder, principal, CEO at Equals 11. We're a certified Salesforce consulting partner. So essentially what we do is work with existing Salesforce companies or Salesforce customers to help them improve their overall Salesforce experience. That could be anything from, obviously, AI is a huge topic right now, doing Agentforce implementations and implementing agents, to integrations with other core business systems, improving their overall experience with better business process alignment with the tool, data quality, all kinds of things. So really all around, how do we improve your Salesforce experience?
Okay, perfect. And I know tangentially, about Salesforce because we do a lot of development on the QuickBase platform, which is kind of like what I would call Salesforce Lite.
Yeah, it's a CRM.
Yeah, some similar concepts, some similar capabilities. But I know that when we're doing those projects can be really, really large, right? I mean, they could be simple, but they can also be very, very large. And so, sounds like in the Salesforce world, that's what you build on. So what, just a little off topic, but we'll come back. When you are doing a Salesforce implementation, what are you finding that they are coming from? Like, where are they coming from? What do they use
Sure.
before
Well,
Salesforce?
I would say the majority of the companies that we work with in nonprofits, we work with some very large nonprofits as well, are already bought into the Salesforce ecosystem.
Okay.
So there's kind of two stages here. Is a lot of companies start using it, they get several years in and realize they're out of alignment with their business process. The tool isn't quite working for them. They're spending a lot of money. How do we improve it? Or they're looking to implement new Salesforce technologies because there's a whole suite of technologies they offer. When you're looking at a greenfield Salesforce implementation, they could be coming from a lot of things. Smaller businesses, a lot of times, HubSpot, Zoho are pretty common. Real small businesses, a lot of times it's just coming from spreadsheets and they're saying, okay, now is time for us to grow up. We tend to work more in the mid-market and small enterprise space. So maybe a couple hundred employees to a few thousand. So they're typically beyond the spreadsheets phase
Right.
at that stage, but not always. Sometimes you've got a division or you acquire somebody and that's being rolled in and you're trying to grow and adapt from that. So a lot of times we're pulling data from adjacent systems or premature systems into something that's more mature and better aligned with their business process.
Perfect. Yeah. And we see a lot of the same things on a smaller scale. We have a lot of clients that are on QuickBooks, right? So they're using QuickBooks Enterprise, QuickBooks Online, and they can only take that so far. It's a great accounting system, but it doesn't manage business processes. It doesn't really automate a a lot of business processes. And so when, like you said, when they start growing up, they feel like they're outgrowing the software and they're looking for a solution. Um, and yeah, and what I always tell people is, if there's a cookie cutter program out there that does exactly what you need to do, great, go for it. But in most cases, every business that we work with, they're doing every standard thing 10 different ways from other people in that exact same industry. So there's no cookie cutter program out there that typically solves all the problems. So I can imagine that's a lot of what you get into. Um,
Yeah, yeah, it's very, the nice thing about the Salesforce space, and a lot of CRMs are this way, but Salesforce especially, is it's highly customizable.
yeah,
Um, the catch is, how do you use the out of the box features as much as possible? That way you're
right.
not creating a lot of technical debt. We do come into scenarios where a lot of custom code may have been written. Salesforce supports something called Apex, a type of, it's a software language essentially.
Hmm.
And you'll run into Salesforce engineers that like to code. And there's a way to use the declarative aspects of Salesforce to configure something, or
Yeah,
it could be written in code. And when you write in code, it potentially creates technical debt that you've now got to support that code when another
yeah.
update comes to the SaaS platform, that type of thing. So we're always discouraging that unless it's a necessary evil.
Yeah, no, that's good. The word technical debt, I haven't heard that in a while, but that is something that I know
I hear it all the time.
back in the day when there was a lot more people, I think, doing coding and
Yeah.
programming and having mainframes and all those other legacy systems, quote unquote. I know that's a big problem and obviously still a problem. So I know one of the things we talked about offline, we talked about software implementations and how do you manage those
Yeah.
effectively. Those are projects, right? But you also mentioned that there's something called a program. And so how do you make a distinction between a project and a program and why should we care?
Sure. Good question. So you'll hear about program management, you'll hear about project management, or you may or may not, but eventually you will. And what a program essentially is a number of projects put together. So it's a bigger project that's made up of smaller projects. So what you'll see, especially in larger organizations or where there's a major, like a digital transformation, that would be more of a program typically, because you're touching multiple core business systems and multiple business processes, potentially integrating new systems or replacing systems and modernizing things. And it takes a different level of project management. If you try to do that as one project, you're probably going to stumble because it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
So you need to segment it up, chop it up into smaller pieces, and essentially manage each one of those pieces as a separate project, but rolling up into a bigger program. So that's essentially the difference. I think people
Okay.
get confused by the two, but that's it.
Got it. Got it. Well, I can imagine, and I think we've also experienced this too, is especially if you're thinking of those programs not in terms of a program, but like separate, distinct projects. I think the challenge at the end of the day is you've got maybe a little bit more silo type of thinking, and now these things that independently work great don't necessarily work together as a whole. So how do you keep everything flowing and working together? Do you map that out at the beginning? Do you just kind of figure it out as you go? It's like what's your process for something like that?
Sure. I think with all these things, it is important to map it out at the beginning. You don't necessarily need to micromanage it and map it out in a 1990s waterfall methodology at all. I'm not encouraging that per se, but it's important at first to agree upon what's the goal. Where are we going from here? If we're
Yeah.
going from the East Coast to the West Coast, well, that's good to know that we're going from the East Coast to the West Coast, but let's narrow it down a little bit more, figure out what those milestones are along the way. We've got to stop, we've got a checkpoint here, and this is what it should look like. The next one is here. This is what it should look like. The next one's here, because it's important to get buy-in from everybody involved, whether they're adjacently involved because you're supporting them, or they're one of the people responsible for the individual efforts along the way. You need to get everybody aligned, pointed in the same direction, and heading towards. So I think that's first and foremost
Yeah.
what you need to do when you're starting the project, or a program. But from there, I think it's really important to take the time to not just plan the project out, but plan how you're going to execute the project out. So think about building a house.
Hmm.
If I say, hey, how much is it going to cost, Brad, for me to build a house? And I leave it wide open there, you're not even going to know where to start. Well,
Right.
like, do we need to buy the land? Is the land already there? Is the land cleared? Is it tied into city utilities, electrical and plumbing and whatnot? Or do we need to dig a well and put in whatever else? Is it going to be 3 stories? Is it going to be 1 floor? Is it 10 bedrooms? Is it 2 bedrooms? You
Yeah.
need to start thinking through those core elements and planning out and then saying, okay, I'm going to need a plumber for this. I'm going to need an electrician for that. I'm going to need a framer for this, a roofer for that. Here's when those different pieces come in. The same thing happens when you're doing a software project or really any technology project. I would encourage you to take the time, say, okay, what are the pieces we need? When? How do they integrate with one another? How do we do handoffs? What is the definition of done? So I don't give
Hmm.
something to you and you say, hey, Jim, it's not done. I didn't start yet. And I find out 3 weeks later that you think you're waiting for something else from me, but I thought I gave you everything. So taking the
Yeah.
time to discuss that, agree upon that, understand that at those milestones, what does success look like so it can be measured along the way. Too many businesses wait until they're way into a project or they think they're nearing the end of a project before they realize that it's off the rails.
Yeah.
And it's because they didn't take the time to plan it out, figure out what those metrics are that they were going to measure, schedule out the right meetings and the right people and all those things. That can go into a lot more detail in any of those if you want to.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's really, yeah, at a high level, it's that proper planning prepares for perfect performance or whatever that
Love
acronym
it.
is. Um, if you don't plan, it's not going to work well. And more often than not, the failures are a result of rushed execution instead of taking the time to plan.
Yeah, God, a lot to unpack in there. There's a
Yeah.
couple things that I want to do. I do want to dive in a little bit deeper on, and that's because again, there's so many similarities in terms of what you do and what we do, just in sort of a different part of the market. But one of the challenges that I think we experience is, clients when they call us up, even though it might take them feels like 6 months to make a decision to do something, right? We all have the clients that it just takes a long time to
Yeah.
get them to move. But once they are ready to move, suddenly they're in a hurry and they want everything done fast, right? So one challenge is slowing a client down to the point where you can take the time to plan out that process versus they just want to see some results quickly because they're spending money and they're seeing the dollars start rack up. So I think that's one challenge that I'd love for you to just like touch on a little bit more. And then the second part of that is, getting all the stakeholders in the room that need to be in the conversations at the very beginning so that you're not building something that's perfect for 2/3 of the
Mhm.
group and then finding out later that there's this whole other group that was like, this is critical and you didn't think about that. you know so how do you take the time, how do you slow the client down, and how do you get the right people in the room?
Yeah, there's a saying that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And I think easier said than done. Getting buy-in, especially if the perception is urgent or if the culture of an organization is that way. And I'm
Yeah.
very much I don't want to say a move fast and break things person, but I am a action-oriented person. So I respect the desire for speed, the desire for velocity. At the same time, it's really important that you know what you're doing because if you go to the wrong place fast, it doesn't matter that you got there quick. So trying to get buy-in, especially at an executive level, leadership level, that hey, we have a process. You need to trust the process. This is why it's successful. Showing prior use cases, getting buy-ins from other past clients, testimonials, that type of thing, to help people get comfortable with hey, this may feel like it starts a little slower than you'd like, but
Yeah.
there's a method to the madness. And if we follow this process, which is why you're hiring me, is to execute. And if we follow the process to execute well, then we're going to be successful. If we rush into something, you're going to waste time, you're going to waste money, you're going to waste, a lot of energy, and you're not going to get what you want.
Right.
So I think initially it's taken the time to get the buy-in from the key executive stakeholders, people who are sponsoring things, that type of thing. And then you talked about it, bringing all the stakeholders in at the beginning. You don't necessarily need everybody in at the beginning, but you need the key people that are responsible for the different areas that it's touching so you can get their buy-in that here's how we're going to do it. Here's when we're going to need your people. Here's what we're going to need them for. Here's
Yeah.
why we're going to need them. Because as much of a successful project or the ability to execute a project successfully is about communication as it is anything else.
Right.
And the engineers in us all, when we're talking to tech people, don't want to acknowledge that. We just want to get down and do the work. But the reality is that it's the nuance of the communication that helps you to avoid missed expectations, missed handoffs, that type of thing. And more often than not, if you're just going out doing whatever you think you're doing without the input and the feedback loop
Right.
of other people's involvement, you're going to run into a scenario where you miss the mark.
Yeah. No, it makes perfect sense. One of my favorite phrases, when having those kind of client conversations is, let's assume we don't have everybody in the room that we needs to be in the room that needs to be there, right? I'll ask, if this project went off the rails, who's going to be who's going to be the most upset,
Yeah.
and are they in the room? And invariably they'll say, well, Bob in accounting is going to be really upset if this thing doesn't go well. Well, have we
Right.
heard
Where's
from
Bob?
Bob?
Yeah.
Have we
Because
heard
I
from
need to
Bob
manage
and what
Bob's
he?
expectations and I need
Yeah.
to make sure Bob understands what we're doing and why we're doing it. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So good stuff. Well, so you guys are a solution provider, obviously on the Salesforce
Hmm.
space. And so when we think of solution providers, those are people that we can reach out to solve problems and do things that we might not have the internal capabilities to do. So when it comes to, if you kind of put yourself in the shoes of a client that's maybe looking for a solution provider, what would you say are maybe some of the mistakes that a client would make when they're trying to select a solution provider, and maybe like how to do it better?
Sure. I think uh, all this stuff is really intricately tied in together, everything we're going to talk about and everything we have talked about. So I think that first thing is defining what success looks like and making sure that your solution provider understands where you're going and more importantly, why you're going there. What does it mean to the business or the organization?
Hmm.
And why are you going there? Because if they don't understand that, they're probably going to miss the mark. So I think I see mistakes there where somebody comes in, tries to be very matter of fact. I was on a call on Friday with a prospective client that's like, oh, we just need this. Well, yeah, just isn't, we need to understand a little bit more about why you need it, how you do what you do, why this matters, so we can get the contextual understanding, understand the lay of the land, and come in and do that. So I think as a company going out and trying to hire somebody to do this work for you, it behooves you to take the time to understand and to explain to them and help them understand what you're doing and why it matters to the business first and foremost. So I would say if you're not getting a lot of questions from that vendor or that partner, and we like to refer to ourselves as a partner. I think there's a difference between being a vendor and a partner. There's a difference between being a client and a customer.
Right.
And so if you truly want to partner, you need to invest in that relationship and take the time to share with them what you're doing it, why it matters, so that they can understand and bring it. And if they're not asking you quality questions about that, that's a huge red flag.
Yeah.
If you went to a car dealership and said, I need to buy a car, and somebody just gave you the first car and they didn't understand, what you needed that vehicle for,
Yeah.
then they're probably not going to put you in the right vehicle. So same thing here. I think it's important for you to be looking for companies, vendors, partners, service providers who are asking good questions about the need and the why, so that they can understand how you're going to use whatever that technology is better for the organization. So those would be the biggest things for me.
Okay, awesome, awesome. And I'm gonna flip that question around, because obviously when clients are engaging with you and when they're engaging with us, they're evaluating us. But I
Yeah.
think at the same time, if it's not the lesson you learn on the first day, it's a lesson you learn at some point over 10, 15, 30, 10, 15 to 30 years,
I see
which
where this
is,
is
I
going.
think we as solution providers and partners also need to be selective about who we
Absolutely.
work with. So when you think of the clients that maybe, what are some of the signs that maybe this is a client we shouldn't work with, or we're going to have a bad experience with and everybody's going to lose?
Sure.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I think some of that is back to what's your focus? And it doesn't need to be Uber focused. We're not Uber focused, but I mentioned earlier, our clients typically are in that mid-market space, a couple hundred to a couple thousand employees. If they get much smaller than that, then they may or may not be a good fit for a lot of reasons for us. If they get much larger than that, then they're probably not a good fit in most cases. And there's exceptions to every rule.
Yeah.
But you need to warrant those exceptions carefully and take the time to vet them and say, okay, they're behaving like a business that is aligned with how I just framed it. And so it's okay to do that. So whatever if you're a solution provider listening to this, watching this, I think understanding where you are best and where you are most likely to be successful and what does that look like. So we don't typically work with real small clients. I mean, we've got a couple clients that might have 75 employees or something like
Right.
that, but most of our clients are well over 100. And there's a reason for that as far as their level of maturity and how they use Salesforce, and how their organizations are leveraging the tool better where we feel like we can provide more value and we
Right.
can justify the cost for that value. So for us, it's things like that. If somebody's uh, not willing to spend enough money or not willing to commit the time to the process on the front end, that's a big red flag for me. More so that the committing the time to understanding and helping us develop the right solution and plan this because when things go wrong, they're going to point fingers at me. So if they don't allow us to follow our process, that's a huge red flag.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now that's fantastic. Well, interestingly enough, again, as you're talking, my examples are just coming to my mind about all these different scenarios that we've gotten into where maybe in hindsight we shouldn't have done it, or we should have
Sure.
made a different call, or maybe referred it to somebody else that would have been a better fit. And we've had to learn those lessons ourselves. One of the examples that comes to mind is, when a client basically sends out sort of like one of those blanket RFPs, and it's like, hey, I've got an RFP for this system that we're trying to build. In my experience, I don't like them. I mean, I'm just going to say it. I don't like them. I don't like RFPs.
Me
It
either.
seems like they never end well. It just feels like somebody's just shopping for probably the lowest bid, whatever. But when somebody comes with an RFP mindset, it feels to me like they're not really looking for a partnership. They're just looking to check a box because somebody said you got to go get three bids, whatever those things are.
Yeah.
How do you guys respond to RFPs?
Yeah,
Is that a
typically
game that
we
you can
don't.
play?
Yeah, typically we don't. Like the only reason we may is if they're truly giving us the opportunity to spend some time meeting with them, discussing the RFP, why certain things in the RFP matter. We may be willing to submit, but if they're not going to give us the opportunity to have a good discussion,
Yeah.
my experience, a lot of RFPs, the decision's already been made. And the company that they're going to work with probably helped them develop the RFP. And
Interesting.
now they're just shopping it to make sure that they can get the best deal with that company. And they're creating some leverage on the bid side. And so
Yeah.
for me, we typically don't respond to RFPs. It's also, an RFP, I'd rather not have the conversation with a prospective client. I'd rather not start the conversation with them when they're ready to buy. Because at that point, they've predefined in their head, I need X, Y, and Z, and they're shopping it. And now it becomes this, how do we create apples to apples scenario? I would much rather have the conversation about the strategy. How can we help you? Here's some things we can do to provide value to your business. Does it make sense to talk about how we can reduce the amount of time your people spend in the CRM and at the same time give you better data so you're making better business decisions? Okay,
Right.
well, there's a win-win there. You're making better business decisions, and you're not spending as much time in the CRM because nobody wants to spend time in the CRM. And then now we're talking about a strategy and how do we help them do that, and we can get involved ahead of that time where they're shopping, whether it's RFPs or they're just going to bid to say, hey, give me a quote for this. So we try to avoid that. It's not
Yeah.
always avoidable. Um, but the problem there is a lot of times companies think they want something and they're treating a symptom rather than the root cause. And if you're trying to answer and provide them a quote for the solution to a symptom, they're not going to be happy in the end. So I'd rather provide some level of consultative solutioning with them so that we can help them, come up with the right solution. And it's probably not far from what they're thinking, but it may not be exactly what they're thinking.
Well, I love that. I mean, just, yeah, I mean, the whole concept of just having a conversation and probably multiple conversations before you invest probably, 5, 10, 15 hours trying to fill out a nightmarish,
Not
document
90
that
pages
somebody
of yeah, forms that
for,
you can't fill any of them out
yeah,
exactly, or half of them you can't give the exact answer. You've got to kind of massage something to make it fit. And then
yeah,
you wonder why you didn't win. Well,
or
because
these
it wasn't a good fit.
these security questionnaires, right? So the security and compliance checks, and do you have all these data security things? Well, yeah, we do, but it's like, am I going to spend 5 hours digging up all this stuff to check all the boxes and still have it go on somebody's desk, like you said, where they maybe even have already made the decision?
Yeah,
Those are frustrating. So, well, this is great. I mean, this has been a great conversation. I think we could probably talk for a lot longer, but I think you've really given some great feedback and advice. And so, my question for you, you already mentioned a little bit about what you guys do at Equals 11 in the Salesforce space, but maybe just kind of tell a little bit more about that. And then, like, if somebody is looking, maybe they're in that 100+ thousand ish employee level, and they're looking for a Salesforce implementation. How do they get a hold of you guys?
sure. No, I appreciate that. So yeah, and part of the reason I say 100 plus is um, typically if you've got four people using Salesforce, it's not going to be super sticky and you're not going to be committed to leveraging the tool to provide the most value to you. If you've got 100 people or a couple hundred people, you probably have 25, 50, 75 of them using the tool. At that point, you're committed because you're paying a lot of licensing for the tool and you want to make sure it gets done right. And so once our clients get that much skin in the game, now it's in everybody's vested interest for it to be done right, not just done. And so that's part of the reason why we typically work with clients that are that size or
Yeah.
larger. And candidly, once they get to a couple thousand employees, they're probably talking to Accenture and Deloitte and IBM Global Services and Tech Mahindra and the other big boys. And then if we're being brought in, we're probably being used as a negotiation tool against somebody else, to your point on the RFP.
Yeah.
There are exceptions to that rule. If we've got a strategic relationship with somebody, then there may be a reason for us to continue the conversation. We've got a couple clients that way that are much larger clients than we typically work with, but we have a strategic relationship with somebody who's bringing us in. Like we've been working a year and a half on a major SAP upgrade for a large heavy equipment company that is using Accenture to do the SAP work.
Hmm.
But there's a bunch of adjacent Salesforce work being done. And so we're
Right.
working alongside Accenture. They're doing the SAP side, we're doing the Salesforce side. We're reconnecting Salesforce to the new SAP instance and modernizing some things along the way. And we have been for 18 months. So great opportunity for us, really good for the client.
Okay.
But that's an exception to the rule. So as far as is what we're doing, yeah, we do greenfield Salesforce implementations. A lot of what we do though is work with existing Salesforce clients. Right now, I mentioned AI has been a huge topic for the last several years,
Yeah, for sure.
whether it was generative AI and how do we automate communication or customize websites based on the user that's visiting it using generative AI. We can do that type of technology with Salesforce. How do we look at the customer view from the sales process to the service process to the marketing process for the next sale or the marketing process on the front end of that sale? And so we work with a lot of clients on that whole life cycle.
Hmm.
And lately, there's been a lot of AI conversations. You've
Oh,
got
I know.
CEOs, boards that are saying, "Hey, we don't want to fall behind in the industry. How do we remain relevant? Where can we use AI to do this? How do we streamline our operations?" I mentioned getting more people out of the CRM or reducing the amount of time they're in the CRM. So a lot of AI applications to do that, where we can improve the data quality, capture the data better, give you better data that you're making decisions from,
Right.
with actually less effort from your team members using the CRM. So if we can do that, it's a win-win for everybody, whether it's the sales team or the marketing team or the customer service team, and that's a lot of what we're doing right now.
Awesome. Awesome. And so how does somebody get a hold of you?
So equals11.com. So you can spell it all out, or you can do equals 11. You can just like behind me here, .com. You'll go to our website. There's a lot more information about the type of work we do. There's a form there. You can reach out and contact us. We're also on LinkedIn, YouTube. We do webinars every couple months. You can see some webinars if there's topics of interest. Recently, we've done them on managed services solutions for businesses, on Salesforce security. You mentioned security earlier.
Hmm.
Salesforce licensing. How do you more effectively control your spend with Salesforce? It's not an inexpensive tool. So we do a lot of work with that. We did a webinar recently about that, and that's all on YouTube as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, and of course, if anybody out there is looking to get a hold of Jim and wants more information and couldn't figure any of that out, give us a call, send us an email, reach out to us, and I'll put you in contact with Jim and the great folks over at Equals 11. So thanks, Jim. I really appreciate your time.
Likewise, Brad. Thank you. Have a good one.
Absolutely. And for those of you that are listening in or watching, I hope this is a good episode for you. Obviously, we got Salesforce expertise here to help you. And if you're looking for a solution, whether it's big or small, definitely reach out and we can make sure and put you in the right hands, put you in touch with the right people, and look forward to continuing to bring you great content. And thanks for watching. There is a Solution for That is produced by VARC Solutions. This episode was produced by Ashley White and Aaron Riley. You can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Watch the video version on youtube.com/There's a Solution for That. Or visit varcsolutions.com/podcast, where you'll find our entire podcast archive, as well as show notes, links to solution providers, and complete transcripts of every episode. If you love the podcast, please leave a review with your comments.